everybody. My name is Anna, if you don't already know me. I am executive producer of Odyssey Storytelling. You may have seen my face before on Facebook, possibly, obviously at shows on stage. I've also been a storyteller. If we're not familiar with each other, this is a good opportunity for us to kind of touch base for the first time. Certainly encourage everybody to get to know each other in the Odyssey community. So I'm speaking to you today basically for a special announcement. You may have noticed earlier this week we posted an announcement on behalf of Odyssey about Black Lives Matter. We felt it was very important for us to create that statement and let people know where we stand because it's a very historical thing that's happening right now, and I think it's an incredibly important thing for all of us to stand by the Black community and express our support in whatever way we can. Which brings me to sort of my announcement or my point today. Number one, I really encourage everybody to actually read that statement, take a look at what we said. And then secondly, I just want to say I definitely feel like our community, the Odyssey community itself, is a very strong community. It's a tight-knit community. I feel like we all support each other in lots of different ways, and we are often allies to each other in different ways. And so I would like to challenge everybody to take this as an opportunity to be an ally, specifically to the Black community. I think this is a good time to stand with them in any way that we can. It's understandable if not everybody is able to go to a protest or doesn't feel safe going out. Obviously, we're still kind of in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, so understandable there. So we thought that it might be good for us to just offer another opportunity for something else that we're able to do on behalf of Odyssey, and also just to provide space for those who perhaps can't go to the protests. So we're going to be holding a special event called Black Stories Matter. We've got a couple of storytellers already after the announcement that was made earlier, and I'm looking forward to receiving many more stories. We would love to hear from people who wish to share their personal experiences, in particular around the issue of structural racism. And just as a reminder, and I think we mentioned it, of course, in our statement, racism specifically, it's an issue that's existed for as long as we've been a country in the world, and longer than that before us. And certainly it's more than just people's individual opinions and words that they say. So please keep that in mind as you're trying to be an ally, which is why I think this event is so important. We want to hold space and enhance voices that are trying to get attention right now, rightfully so. So please reach out. If you have stories or you know people who might have a story, they can always submit them as usual through stories@odysseystorytelling.com, and reach out to us through our Facebook or other social media, and obviously through our newsletter as well if you've received that. On a personal note, I do want to say it's been a rough couple of weeks, as a woman of color, as an immigrant, as a woman in a committed relationship with a Black man. It's a scary, emotional time. I found myself, especially here in Tucson, I feel like being on the West Coast, I kind of convince myself sometimes that things are more progressive here because I've lived in other places. But that's not real, unfortunately. And just walking around with my boyfriend sometimes, watching people be fearful, staring, looking with, looks of disdain and things like that, that are really very hurtful and very hard to deal with, have been, that's been a challenge. But in addition to that, right now, it's hard, it's definitely, as someone, anybody, I think, who loves someone who is not white, I think could relate to that. But especially, I think Black men in America have a very tough time with that. And at least obviously I can't understand it completely because I'm very light-skinned and I could pass for white, and I realize there's definitely some privilege there. But I do sometimes, quite frankly, honestly fear that he may not make it home. And that's a tough thing to deal with. So I think being in that position has reminded me how real all of this is and how much we really need to continue fighting it. And that is why I feel so strongly about this. From an Odyssey standpoint, highly encourage you to reach out to dialogue. If you have questions, if you're unsure how to be a good ally, you need advice on that, please reach out to people who have labeled themselves a resource, okay? People of color don't need to educate others about that, but if you know somebody that you trust who has labeled themselves a resource, reach out and ask questions. You can certainly reach out to me. You can consider me a resource for that. I hope everybody is staying healthy and safe wherever you are, especially with the ongoing pandemic. And please remember to reassure people that Black lives matter. Thank you.
Welcome to the second ever virtual Odyssey event, Stories from the Quarantine. I'm Roscoe Mutz. I'm the curator and taking you on this video adventure of fully pre-recorded stories. We have 6 fantastic storytellers that recorded themselves in their natural environment, either alone or on a Zoom meeting. But we are going to bring you some fantastic stories to hopefully entertain you during the quarantine, where people aren't really sheltering in place very much anymore. But these stories are very much from that time period or inspired by that time period. At the start of the quarantine, my girlfriend Lisa and I decided we were going to try to learn something every day or do something. And Lisa just went by in the mirror. So we recorded ourselves, and we were pretty good for the first several days. Like, this is day 1 of quarantine, and here's what we learned. So rather than tell you that story, I think because of, the awesomeness of the technology, I can just show you some of them. So here is the first video we decided to make. If I can get it to work. There we go.
Welcome to Things We Learned in Quarantine, number 1.
So there you have it. That was I didn't promise you that we learned anything too impressive, but that was at least our first attempt at trying to learn something a little bit different. I still don't know. I never did that kind of hand clapping from my childhood, but I learned something. So there you go. The second one we did was even less impressive, probably, if you can believe that. I guess I don't need to intro it. I'm just going to show it to you. So here's one, maybe not the second video, but one that we made.
Okay, this is not really things we necessarily learned during quarantine anymore. It's just things that we figured out are fun.
Ways to entertain ourselves. So we each have a big handful of bouncy balls. And we're locked ourselves in our small bathroom. We're gonna bounce these all at once. Ow, no, you gotta bounce them at once. Okay. If you're ready, that's gonna go to your training, man. All right.
What a waste of a paper towel, precious resource.
I don't want to fish a tiny bouncy ball out of a fucking drain. All right.
I don't have spring out. I need
You
to
wasted
keep it about.
yours.
No, I didn't.
You wasted yours. So, Lisa learned a lesson about bouncing your ball too early. Yeah.
God, best use of a paper towel yet.
Yep.
There you have it. Best use of a paper towel yet during quarantine. So, I'll be sharing a few more videos we made throughout today's show, but it is my great pleasure to introduce our first storyteller who's joining us on the virtual Odyssey stage, but she's no stranger to the regular stage. It's my pleasure to introduce our first storyteller, Jana Segal-Stormont.
With everything that's going on in our country right now, I know I have no reason to complain. I understand how privileged I am to be sheltering safely at home with my loved ones, getting up every morning to water my trees, even nagging my son to clean his bathroom. We are blessed. But sometimes I just feel sort of stressed out and overwhelmed. I keep thinking about those landlords putting people out into the streets during this record heat. The other night, it was 95 degrees. That's really bad because it's supposed to cool off at night so our bodies have a chance to recuperate. Even my desert plants are suffering. My prickly pear is getting all yellow and wrinkled like the life force is being sucked out of it. And I can't even imagine how those people living in a wash survive. I guess some of them don't. I'm sorry. I'm afraid I'm experiencing what one article calls moral fatigue. See, I'm one of those people like Greta who really believe in climate change and that we should do everything we can to mitigate it so we can have a habitable planet. But it's just gotten so hard, especially for those of us who are trying to keep the single-use plastic out of the landfills. The policies that the grocery stores put in place make it difficult for us to bring our reusable bags. And then there's all those takeout restaurants with their plastic bags and plastic straws and plastic silverware and hoarding toilet paper. What's that about? But there's hope too. All of this time sheltering in place gives us a chance to reflect on what's really important. The other day, I saw one of my neighbors plant a tree. And then when the food chain was disrupted, all these people rushed off to Home Depot and bought up all the gardening supplies, which has its own problems because all that gardening takes a lot of water. And then I worry about what if they don't know low water desert gardening methods? As some of you know, I've done other stories like the Crazy Weed Lady and Moringa disasters. So, I'm a little obsessive when it comes to this whole desert gardening and harvesting thing. I've been known to interrupt somebody crossing on the other side of the street to point out edible weed. The neighborhood dog walkers step it up when they pass my yard. I guess Jeremy gets it the worst. See, Jeremy has the privilege of sheltering in place with Dan and I. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Jeremy's a struggling stand-up comedian. Before the coronavirus, he would perform at 1 or 2 open mics a night and then hang out with his comedian buddies. Then when he would get home, he would stay up all night writing and then sleep most of the next day, which is all right, except for when does he do his chores? Sometimes our paths would cross in the morning on his way to bed, and I would nudge him about, maybe you want to wash the counter? And he would respond, leave me alone. To be fair, Jeremy does do his own dishes and his own laundry, and he's not really a morning person. In fact, he's more of a recluse with a dark side that informs his comedy. Dan's dog, Pooh-Butt, yes, Pooh-Butt, kind of senses all this. So when Jeremy leaves his room, she goes crazy as if a robber just broke into the house. It's a wonder that Jeremy ever leaves his room. Then I worry about him becoming a hermit. To make matters worse, me and Jeremy really don't communicate. I guess I nag him until he storms off. Sometimes we're in the middle of a conversation and he'll just start doing a monologue to some other audience. Eventually, he'll dismiss me so he could go write it all down in his comedy notebook. I get it. He longed to perform. He couldn't wait for Dan and I to leave the house so he could put on a Broadway show tune and sing and dance to his heart's content. I used to do the same thing when I was his age. But this whole coronavirus has made that difficult. There was a time we used to leave the house nearly every day. Now, we rarely leave the house at all. First, Dan's bike was stolen, and then we tried to ride the city bus and only took one ride with the guy. He gets right up into our face and spouts off about the COVID conspiracy. That took care of that. Now the only time we get out of the house for a break is to walk the dog. Thanks, Pooh-Butt. I have even limited my trips to the store to once a week to avoid these careless shoppers. Sometimes I drag Jeremy along, and on the way out, I might point out how my moringas are doing. And he responds, I don't care. And then lectures me about how I don't care if he's interested. I remind him that it's my job as his mother to teach him. Actually, Jeremy's a good kid. He tries to help out. He opens the door as we carry the rinse water out to the hummingbird trumpets. That's kind of a pain too, carrying dishwater out. But it's so worth it because those hummingbird trumpets attract all kinds of pollinators. And we just love watching the hummingbirds buzzing around our prickly pear blooms. Once, Jeremy admitted that he likes to watch the wildlife outside of his window, too. I think he's more of a nature lover than he likes to let on. First of all, Jeremy's been a vegetarian since he was 7 years old, way before me and Dan. And then he goes hiking every weekend with his dad. Wait a minute. I wonder if getting up early for that hiking started to change his sleep habits. So now he's awake more during the day and he's less grouchy. Sometimes I like to watch him as he sings and dances around the living room. So now that our relationship's going better, I still worry about all of those people using too much water in their gardening. Is there anything that I can do? I mean, how can I write a blog when my own yard is looking crispy now that our shade tree has been removed? And as much as I love all those little animals scurrying around the yard, they are wreaking havoc on our garden. Sensing my frustration, Jeremy said, "Doesn't it take a while to really get good at gardening? How long have you been doing it?" which inspired me to reach out to my Facebook peeps and to share their expertise in short videos and blogs. And you know, I finally got something to blog about too. Our prickly pear fruit ripened, so I did a colorful blog about Dan and I harvesting and preparing all that prickly pear fruit. And I didn't need to worry about Jeremy. He started, instead of becoming more reclusive, he started hanging out with me and Dan. He hangs out when we wash the dishes, and he says he enjoys our company, and we enjoy his. He even suggested a family storytelling night. After that first night, we hung out and told more stories. That was good for our communication skills. No nagging, no monologues. Did I mention that my son is a genius?
What a proud mom. Now, Janice shared with me some photos of her plants that were not doing so well at the beginning of all of this. So if you were interested in seeing why Jana might be concerned with the state of her prickly pear, yeah, they're rather withered and yellow in that photo. But all is not lost. They did regain some life and vibrancy. And in fact, if you go to Jana's blog, which I'll share now, Sustainable Living Tucson, you can see there's a post where her and her partner Dan harvested some prickly pear, and I think it even gives you, yeah, there's a picture of the prickly pear in the flowering and better state, and Dan harvesting some of the fruit, and the blog will tell you kind of how to do that, and chopping it up, sauteing it, and there you go. You got a recipe for pretty good brunch. And that's right on Jana's blog again, Sustainable Living Tucson. It's my great pleasure to introduce the next storyteller, who is a childhood friend of mine. We go back to probably the 4th or 5th grade in Boy Scouts. Our friendship was solidified when we were having competitions to see who could chug root beers as fast as we could, and then we'd slam our hand on our chest because that fizz just gets you, you know, it kind of is biting. And he doesn't drink sodas anymore, so we can't, you know, drink root beers together, but he is probably the person that I have the most inside jokes with and that I text on a daily or weekly basis. So it's my good pleasure to introduce one of my best friends, Brett Kramer.
My name is Brett Kramer, and I am a high school psychology teacher in suburban Kansas City. And I grew up with one of the individuals who was organizing this event, or maybe the individual, Roscoe, who it sounds like he's kind of in the trenches of a lot of the storytelling stuff that goes on with this group in Tucson. And we've been good friends for 30 years or so. And he let me know that the theme of this was stories from the quarantine. I have to admit, I'm going to kind of break the rules a little bit. If that's a firm guideline, I expect him to just trash this and delete it and say I cheated. But I spent plenty of time during the quarantine trying to figure out how I was going to teach and everything. But also there was all kinds of time to reflect, because I actually was, there's the number of people that were not actually quarantined. They just would ignore probably what was best for public health and go out. But I was in Kansas City and then left. I came back up to our hometown of fewer than 2,000 people in north central Kansas, just because I thought I could be useful to my mom and to my brother's family who live here. but I really did spend most of 2 weeks on the property, just trying to do it right. So I had plenty of time to think. And while these stories didn't take place during the last 10 or so weeks, I sure thought about a lot of these kinds of things when I was left with little else to do besides think. But I took this job 5 years ago, and it was half-time. And because the person that quit taught half a day of biology and half a day of psychology, and I'm not a science certified teacher in Kansas, so I can only teach psychology, but it's a school that has a good reputation, so I was encouraged to take the job. And so to supplement my income, I signed up to be an Uber driver about midway through the year. And it was good for me financially, and it was nice because there's a lot of autonomy and everything. But I've done a lot of it. That was January of 2016, and I still do it even though I've gone full time and have a normal salary. But it's just nice to be able to make some extra money and things like that. But you're bound to get some interesting occurrences. And at one point I started a blog, and I categorized a list of trips as the most noteworthy maybe, and then the most awful. And so I'm going to share one of each of those with you. I'm going to go with first the one that's the one that I think is funniest, I guess, or how in the world did that happen? What are the chances? This was just, and I don't even know when it was, sometime since January of 2016, but probably within the first year and a half of me doing this. But I was driving in Olathe, which is a suburb in the Kansas City area on the Kansas side of the state line. And that's not really that close to where I was living, but I ended up down there because we didn't used to know where trips would take us. But so ending up down there is not that crazy, but I picked the guy up, I think it was a weeknight, and I took him to a bar. We wouldn't know where we were going until we started the trip. So this was a short one. It was probably 5 or 7 minutes. And I'll talk to you if it's evident that you're willing to have a conversation. And he gets in and, asks me all the normal stuff. Is this what you do for a living? Are you from this area? How often do you drive? Yada, yada, yada. And so I asked him what he did, and he said he was the foreman for a number of construction projects in the metro area. And one of them, his boss, well, I guess the boss would be the same for all these projects, but one project was what he was at the time working on most closely. And he said that he was going to this bar, he's doing it right. He figured he'd drink a fair amount and didn't want to drive down there. And so said that he was meeting his boss who was coming in from Florida. And, I was like, well, that sounds fine. He's checking in, or what's he doing? He's like, oh, this guy, whenever he comes to town, it's always a good time. He likes to party. We're going to have a great time, so on and so forth. It was just pretty normal conversation. And, since I'm cheating a little bit here, and when I'm telling you stories that didn't actually happen during the quarantine, I'm also sort of cheating when I categorize this as the most noteworthy trip, because it actually turns out to be 2 trips. I dropped this guy off, and if the second leg of this never happened, then there would be no story to tell. But I dropped him off, and immediately I got a request from a hotel that was half a mile or a mile down the street. And I took it, and I went to go pick this person up. And, again, I'm sort of a talker, and if you get in and you're getting in from a hotel, I'll probably, I try to read the situation. And if it's evident that you're someone who is going to be chatty, just like I am, if you're coming from a hotel, I'm probably going to ask you where you came from, where you're in town from. And this guy gets in, and he, I asked him, what are you up to tonight? Where are you in from? He said, Florida. And, at that time, I'd started the trip, so I knew where I was going. It was just a little bit down the street. And I noticed it was the same place that I just dropped this guy off at. And I asked him, I said, I'm not trying to pry or anything. It's none of my business, but I'm just curious if you're going there to meet a guy named, we'll go with Bobby. I don't remember the guy's name, and it doesn't matter, but because I just dropped him off, and he said he was meeting his boss from Florida, who was coming into town, and he was looking forward to having a good time. And he said, yeah, I am here to go meet with Bobby at this bar, and we're going to talk about the project that he's on, and so on and so forth. And I said, well, that's great. he's looking forward to it. Sounds like you guys are going to have a great time. And he kind of paused and he said, well, I'm going to have a great time. And I thought to myself, I mean, we're this far into it. He's not really concerned with upholding any anonymity. I'll never, ever in my life see this man again. And I said, well, I mean, I have a guess as to what you mean, but what do you mean? And he said, well, the sole reason that I'm in town is to fire Bobby. And so I'm just thinking, oh, poor Bobby. He seemed like a nice guy. We pull up to the bar, and there's no major climax or punchline to this story, but we pull up, and Bobby is out on the patio with a big beer and a cigarette, and he looks all excited, and because his boss is getting out of this car curbside. As we pull up, he sees it's him, and he looks and he's like, well, that's the same car. I'm sure that this is his thought process. That's the same car that just dropped me off. Wow, what a small world. And I'm just thinking, poor Bobby, your world is about to change. But you know what? The last memory I have of Bobby, and I can't remember what he looks like or what his real name is, he was smiling, and that's good, but I'm sure a little bit later he wasn't. And if he's a sorrow drowning type of guy, I hope that he at least got his drinks comped. But I don't know what ever happened to either of those two people, but that's one of my most favorite ones to share. I'm a small town person, so those kinds of occurrences are more likely to happen in a town like the one I grew up in, but in a suburb of 100,000 people in the metro area in Kansas City, it just wasn't very likely. Speaking of being a small town person, and a teacher, whenever I get passengers that say they grew up in the Kansas City area, again, I gauge the situation. If it's obvious that they're not interested in having a conversation with a total stranger, I get it, and I just drive. But if there's someone that's up for it, a question that I often ask is, where did you go to high school? Because it's possible that I teach at the high school that they went to. I've had a number of those people. Or I might know people that went to your high school. I think this is harmless. On Valentine's Day, less than a month after I started driving for Uber, I had what at the time was definitely the worst ride I've ever had. Now, keep in mind, I'm a half-time teacher, and so a couple of these things, that matters when I say a couple of the details of this story. When I was teaching only half-time, I didn't have to go in until 11:15 every day, and so I admit that there are weeknights that I drank and probably shouldn't have, but I didn't have to get up very early. So I had told myself, this is the last ride for tonight. It was a Sunday night. I'm going to go home and have a couple of beers. I'll accept one more trip, and that'll be it. Then I'm going to go home. And so I do. I pick up a female who is leaving Johnny's Tavern. It's a Lawrence, Kansas City area chain, 95th and Antioch in Overland Park, another suburb. And she gets in. She's by herself, and all the usual, and it happens, and it's all fine. Until we start talking about the question that really probably was the catalyst to all of this was, where did you go to high school? And she said she went to Shawnee Mission North, which is in the district that I teach in. I teach at Shawnee Mission East. However, my brother-in-law went to Shawnee Mission North, and she seemed like she was about my age or maybe a little bit older. And, I had passengers already in that first month that knew my brother-in-law because they went to school together, or his sister, who's my age, a couple years younger than him. And so, I remember telling her, I said, you can hit me over the back of the head for this question. Some people don't like it, but you seem relatively normal and not like someone who would get upset with this. But I asked her, I said, what year did you graduate? Because my brother-in-law graduated in 1999, and I was just curious because it's a very small world, and I don't have anything to apologize for, I don't think, but she would have disagreed. So it was at that moment that the whole thing changed. She went off. I teach psychology. I'm not a genius. I don't have a PhD in psychology, but there are trends with human beings. And one of them is we often displace negative emotion. And she She was going home alone on Valentine's Day, and I'm sure she wasn't happy about it. Hey, but guess what? I was driving for Uber by myself, obviously, on Valentine's Day. It's not like I had some romantic evening. And you didn't see me freaking out on people, but she just lost it. She just, she started saying like, I have all the best drivers and I tip them well, but I'm not going to tip you. And when they take me to Plaza, they don't ask me personal questions. And I bet you grew up in a small podunk nowhere town that didn't teach you manners. Side note, a lot of that statement is true, but I feel like I was taught manners as a kid. And she just went on and on and on, how much, how old are you? How much do you weigh? What did you do for Valentine's Day? Do you like being asked all these personal questions? And I just wanted it to be over. And she even said the words, this is ridiculous, but she said, didn't anyone ever teach you, don't ask a princess her age? Come on. What are you doing? I was probably more likely to be taught, don't refer to yourself as a princess, but that's neither here nor there 4.5 years later. But finally, I'm glancing at the phone. It's got the navigation up and everything. And it says how close we are. We're a quarter mile away, and it'll say about a minute or whatever. And I'm thinking, thank God this is almost over. And she's still kind of laying into me and talking about how she's going to call Uber. And she said, I hope you enjoyed your last ride or your last drive or whatever, because I'm going to get you fired, and so on and so forth. And I pull up to her house, and she says, from the moment she started until the time she got out, she didn't really let up. And she's still going at me as she gets out of the car, and I roll the window down. And as she's starting to walk away, she turns around one more time and says, good luck getting fired. And I'm like, screw you, is what I'm thinking. And I didn't want to respond to that. It wasn't the right thing to do. And again, I'm a teacher of mostly juniors and seniors, and I feel like I'm an all right person. I've made a million mistakes in my life, but I try to be decent and lead by some example. And this was a great opportunity for me to take the high road and just drive off, because after all, everything that I said I wanted for the previous, 8 or 10 minutes was for this ride to be over with. And it was, and I could have just driven away. But everybody has some shred, at least a little bit of petty within them. And I'm no different. So when she said to me, good luck getting fired, I thought to myself for about 2 seconds, don't say it, don't say it, don't do it. But the window was down, she was out of my car, and I knew I could just speed off. I did respond. I have to be transparent here. I did respond with good luck getting younger. And she started yelling, and I just sped off, all like I had won the battle or whatever. But unfortunately for all of us, we all ended up getting older, but that night wasn't a good one for her. And I would like to believe she's not as off-putting an individual as she sure came off as that evening. But again, likely someone I will never see again unless I accompany my brother-in-law to a class reunion someday.
Well, there you have it. A couple stories from the Midwest. Brett has a blog, Tales of KC Uber. And when we get this episode, when we get the bios on the website, we'll make sure to include a link so you can enjoy the other stories that Brett has on his blog. One of the cool things about this whole experience is being able to get storytellers from all over the country, because they don't have to be in Tucson at a certain Thursday night at a certain time. So it's pretty cool to have Brett's story. One of my favorite Uber stories of his that I don't know if it made the blog or not, in Kansas City, the Kansas City Chiefs football games are always very popular. So I imagine that's a pretty good Uber night, because people are either at the game at the stadium or they're watching the game at bars. So I'm sure surge pricing is through the roof. Well, Brett picked up a Chiefs football fan one time who was really drunk, and they started chatting, as Brett was just mentioning, and the guy said, "Are you from the South? Because your accent's kind of funny." And Brett said, "No, I'm from North Central Kansas, but funny that you mentioned that, because I'm a school teacher and my students, they all think I'm from the South because of either my accent or because he uses a lot of folksy colloquialisms, like saying son of a motherless goat." But anyway, this drunk Chiefs fan decided that Brett was pulling a fast one on everyone. So he took it upon himself to take Brett's phone and record a message to Brett's students about whether Brett was from the South. And I thought I would share it with you.
Hi, students of his. He is from the South. I'm sure it is. Have a good time, y'all.
That little video has become something that I have quoted more times than I care to admit. If you're at my house, sometimes it's, hi, students of his. Sometimes it's, I'm sure it is. And my favorite farewell of recently is, have a good time, y'all. I want to play that video for you again, but pay attention to the guy's, just how cocky and sure he is, the looks to the side, and the smirk at the end. I think you'll appreciate it. It gets finer with each viewing.
Hi, students of his. He is from the South. I'm sure it is. Have a good time, y'all.
Just look at that smile, man. He's so pleased. It is my honor to introduce our next storyteller, who sadly moved away from Tucson to New Jersey. But again, we can connect through this app during the quarantine and get his story as part of this show as well. Troy Larkin is no stranger to the Odyssey stage. He's become somewhat of a legend. His stories have been inspiring, from him designing his own Hall of Fame football ring to hilarious with really a series. His oeuvre is largely balls related. So there's a chance that you probably heard one of Troy's stories. So I was very honored that he was available, but also that he'd be willing to share this next story. And so without any further introduction, we'd like to welcome Troy Larkin back to Odyssey.
For those who don't know me, my name is Troy Larkin. I'm a former resident of Tucson of 13 years, and recently, last July, I moved from Tucson back to the state I was born in, New Jersey, and Roscoe asked me to tell a story about my COVID-19 experience. So my COVID-19 experience actually started in January of 2020. I was actually going to Charleston, South Carolina for some work, and I had to go spend a week teaching when my wife was telling me about some news reports she had heard out of China about this crazy disease that was like a SARS and a H1N1 wrapped up into one. And she was really concerned about me traveling through the airport. So I asked her, what do you want me to do? And she asked me to go ahead and please wear a surgical mask on the airplane flight, in the airport, use Purell. And I hate Purell, but she wanted me to Purell my hands after every single thing. And I can't stand it. And unfortunately, my wife has a tendency to be Chicken Little. So she always thinks the sky is falling. It's not just a skin rash, it's MRSA. It's not just, a cough, you have pneumonia. So it's always one of these things where I pretty much dismissed it. I took the masks with me to Charleston, South Carolina, but I thought it was so weird to have to wear a surgical mask in an airport that I put in my bag and I never wore them. As the week went on through Charleston, I noticed more people actually were wearing masks in the airport, and I started paying attention to some of the news reports, and it seemed like it was under control. It was still in China, and I flew home. I had another travel trip coming up in February, and for those who don't really know me, I don't really like to travel. I do it if it's a necessity for work or if it's something that I've agreed upon for a family vacation with my family. But this time was a more selfish motivation. I was headed to New Orleans for Mardi Gras 2020. Friends of mine, my brother and I decided that we would go ahead and have a big Mardi Gras weekend, and we paid for tickets to go to the biggest Mardi Gras ball of them all, the Endymion Ball. So we were preparing to go to New Orleans after I flew to Charleston, South Carolina. As the reports kept coming in, my wife was growing more concerned, and really, she already hated that I was going to New Orleans. She hated that when we lived in New Orleans. She knows the things that go on in New Orleans, and especially during Mardi Gras, didn't want me to go in the first place. So it was a big source of contention about Mardi Gras, but I put my foot down and said, look, I'm just going to go and we're just going to enjoy the weekend and I'll see you afterwards. So I endured several phone calls while there, but I spent my time enjoying New Orleans as I know how. So good food, good music, late nights, Bourbon Street, hanging out with strangers, getting invited and getting paid for to go to random concerts with dudes that I had just met who were, rich guys from Orange County, California, where I grew up. So it was just a really great weekend. And then, of course, it culminated with the Endymion Ball, which was the biggest party in New Orleans. And unfortunately had some setbacks because they had 2 people die during the floats this year in 2020. So it was an unfortunate Mardi Gras season. However, the big ball was still going on. There was music all night long. I got to rock out to Tim McGraw, Styx, Train, and just enjoyed a whole night of music and food and fun and laughter and just being with my brother and being with my best friends. So Mardi Gras was a success, and I flew back from Mardi Gras back to New Jersey. So that trip was down. And once I got back to New Jersey, we started seeing reports that New York was a huge hotbed, and there was shelter in place was coming. People were having concerns. There were all these clusters showing up. And then because we live so close here in New Jersey, we're right across the river. I work in Newark, New Jersey, which is directly across the river from Manhattan. And so there started to show clusters in New Jersey. And so as that started to ramp up, we started paying attention to the news, started paying attention to the shelter in place. We started paying attention to California shutting down. And we started reading the news about what was going on with this Chinese virus, this COVID virus, what was going on with the coronavirus. I mean, there was all these different names at first about what was going on. And my wife really was concerned because I had been traveling and she knew I wasn't going to wear the mask. And we started seeing reports that newer hotspots were popping up. And one of them was New Orleans, thanks to Mardi Gras 2020, that Mardi Gras may have been a huge catalyst for COVID-19 with all the people and all the activities. So I started second guessing, my choices during Mardi Gras, and the places I'd been, and how often did I wash my hands, and how much contact did I have while I was down there for the 4 days for Mardi Gras. And then I started thinking, between New Orleans and now New Jersey being a hot spot, I'm starting to find that I started to swear that this thing was following me, that it was coming after me, and there was nowhere I was able to go where I wasn't going to get got. So in New Jersey, we started paying attention. I had another trip set up for Boston, Massachusetts for work. I had a conference coming up in March, and we were waiting to hear if that was going to get canceled. It did eventually get canceled because of the concerns with the pandemic. Boston was shutting down, the East Coast was shutting down, and I was actually supposed to get set to go back to Charleston for 3 weeks to teach and to be taught how to teach coursework. And luckily, during that time, my wife was going to take time off from her job and spend time with the children while I was gone for 3 weeks into Charleston. But with the COVID, it should be said that my wife is a critical care nurse. So she's a registered nurse. She worked in intensive care in Tucson for 13 years while we were there, 15 years total from California. But she was a critical care nurse. And the weekend that she was set to go into work before her 3-week break started, she went to the critical care unit here at her local hospital. And I had seen a drastic and dramatic shift in her body language following that weekend. She had nothing but COVID patients that first weekend. And she came home, and when I would speak with her about how it went, what was going on, she burst into tears. She shut down, and it was almost as if she had like a PTSD. She was telling me how she was no longer willing to be a critical care nurse. She didn't want to do it. It was like she was in a triage unit and she was in a military field hospital because all of her patients were being tested for it, had it, or were dying from COVID-19. And, the saddest part of that piece where she was talking with her about her patients, and the part that always stays with me, is that she told me that there was a couple there that was married 30 years. They had varying degrees of complications with their COVID-19 diagnosis, and they were on different floors. And as the husband began to code, which means he was preparing to die, they brought the wife down to his floor, and as she was wheeled into the door, her husband had passed. And this made my wife absolutely shudder into tears, that she was telling me this story about what she saw and what she was experiencing, and having to prepare a body and prepare families that were dying of COVID, and then having to deal with the idea that, hey, we can't have visitors in the hospital. We can't have the family come and grieve. We can't have these people being exposed to this. And so there's this lack of the grieving process and everything that goes with death that is being cut off because of the COVID-19 pandemic surrounding it. So that was her first weekend, but luckily she had enough PPE at her hospital. She was able to control, her environment, make sure that she didn't get and contract COVID. And so we spent the next 3 weeks with her outside of work, not going to work. I was continuing to go to work, and as it continued on, we were starting to get the idea that there was going to be shelter at home, shelter in place. And my office, one of my office mates, he lives nearby. He actually is a really good dude. And we decided, since it was his birthday, we were going to have a local barbecue luncheon. We were going to have a great time. And I decided, it's not a day that I normally would go in. It's a telework day for me, but I would carpool to save some money on our parking. So I hopped in his car. We carpooled, had a great lunch. I leave. I had my Friday off. And the next week, I got a phone call and text from him about how his wife had suddenly been stricken very ill. She had a respiratory illness that just knocked her on her butt. She was very ill. She was having difficulty breathing, and he was there at the house, and he felt that he had to quarantine because we got news that there was an attorney in our building in Newark who had been sent home sick from work, and he had symptoms of COVID. He was sent home. He did end up having COVID-19. And from those complications, he was actually hospitalized and intubated at the hospital and put into a medically induced coma. Unfortunate for me, my coworker had direct contact with that attorney the week before and the day before I actually carpooled with him. So we started to grow concerned that his wife was sick, he might be sick. He quarantined, and me being who I am, I volunteered to go to CVS, to pick up his meds, to pick up crackers, to pick up soup, to pick up whatever they needed, to drop it off, to wipe it off with wipes, to do whatever they needed to make sure they could get through this with his wife. And unfortunately, he did have to take his wife to the emergency room because she got so severely ill, and she went to a local hospital, Overlook Hospital here in New Jersey. Luckily and fortunately, in my opinion, his wife was negative for COVID. And my coworker found out that he was negative for COVID. So that relieved some of our tensions in our household that maybe I had been exposed to COVID through him because he had direct contact with someone else. So that was some of the beginnings of the COVID quarantine and some of the problems. As the weeks went on, we had to just have a big discussion with my wife and myself about how we were going to deal with this going forward, because she was in the fire. She's a healthcare worker. She is on a critical care unit. All of the hospital had COVID patients. She was on the front line. She is that person running into that fire with the shields and with the masks and with the paper gowns and the gloves. And so we wanted to make sure that we were protected. And like I said, she's a very anxious person, but for cause. And I appreciate that about her. So she wanted to make sure that she didn't get me sick. I'm an asthmatic, and there's a lot of complications there if you contract COVID. She didn't want to get her children sick. She didn't want to think about what would happen if she was the cause and responsible person for giving her family COVID. So we came up with a game plan. Luckily, where we live 3 blocks away from my grandmother's house. So we were able to actually put my wife up in my grandmother's empty house, and she had full electricity. She actually had better cable than we have at our house, but she was able to live by herself and have a almost like a she-cation where she was solo, living there by herself, but for quarantine purposes. And so we discussed how this was going to work, because at this time, schools had already been canceled. They were doing virtual training at home. So our children were home every day during the week needing us. And now it was going to be every day needing me, because my wife was not going to be physically present. So I would be working 100% of the time, teleworking from home. I was cooking, I was cleaning, I was doing dishes, I was doing trash, I was walking dogs, I was doing everything you could think of, and then having to deal with homework, 4th grade homework, 7th grade homework, having to deal with exercise, getting them together. So I was a one-stop shop for everything, because we decided that my wife had to quarantine for 14 days. Now you say, 14 days is not that long, but you have to remember it's got to be 14 days from her last exposure. So every weekend she goes into work extends it another 14 days. And so there we were trying to figure out how long this period of time of living apart was going to work. And it was interesting that you learn a lot about yourself and who you are during a quarantine, because my wife learned that that was the first time she had ever lived by herself, as a single person, ever by herself. We had to download new apps, so I had to get Duo for Samsung, which is like FaceTime. And so we would FaceTime with each other. It was almost like the 90s where you would talk on the phone forever because you had nothing else better to do. But we did the Duo. We were doing this for a long time. It was a good month of her coming over for dinners, her staying outside, us staying on the porch, her on the grass, her not coming into the house, her not touching anything, her wiping down all the stuff if she did come in, her wiping down all the restrooms and behind her to make sure that everything was taken care of, that if she had any contact whatsoever, just in case of her having gotten contracted with COVID and her having that issue. So that lasted a month. It lasted until Mother's Day weekend. And the reason being, his Mother's Day weekend, we hit a new bump in the road, if you will, for COVID-19 pandemic. Mother's Day is a Sunday in May. I had spent Saturday helping my uncle move some furniture, moving stuff because he was moving to Florida. He needed my help, and I'm always one to volunteer. I'm always one to throw myself in. So with my mask, I went, I helped, I spent the day. I had spent the weekend before doing this, but Mother's Day weekend, Saturday afternoon, I decided, you know, I've been working hard. I got the kids. I'm by myself. I'm doing the stuff with the dogs. My wife is working. I'm here by myself. I'm trying to do everything I can to keep this going, and I wanted a break. So I decided, hey, it's Saturday night. I'm going to make hot wings. I made a curry because I saw some cauliflower rice and I saw some curry sauce. I'm going to make a curry. I'm going to make hot wings. I'm going to make the kids a homemade pepperoni pizza and make it spicy with some Frank's Red Hot sauce. And I just wanted to really, you know, have a Saturday night where I could just watch TV and zone out and just not have to worry about what was coming the next day. So as those Saturday nights go, I had 3 bourbons and Cokes with lime. I had the pizza. I had the wings. I had more Frank's hot sauce. I mean, I was loading it on because I just knew, like, hey, this is my release valve. This is it right here Saturday night. Nothing crazy. Just wanted to eat really bad food for me and watch really bad TV. I woke up Sunday and knew I was going to pay for Saturday night. It's one of those things you just know is coming. And so I knew that my stomach was going to be upset that I had thrown an absolute gut bomb in there the night before. And I was waiting for it to go. So, you know, as I'm using the restroom the first time, I knew it was coming. You uncork the Kraken, if you will. And so the first one, not a problem. You know, you're working through the day. The second one's getting a little bit, you know, faster, looser, no big issues. But then that afternoon, Sunday, I had been baking brownies for my wife. I wanted to give her something nice. I was going to deliver them to my grandmother's house, surprise her that I'd made these brownies. And then I was thinking of her and wishing her happy Mother's Day because we missed her, because we hadn't seen her like full-time in weeks. And so I deliver the brownies, I come home and I had to use the restroom again. And I just, you know, it just felt different. It was, you know, too fast, too loose. And I had noticed some orange as, you know, you peek down after you're done. I just noticed some orange and I was like, oh man, why is that orange? And then I realized, like, oh, I'd had a lot of Frank's Red Hot sauce. So maybe it's just passing through my system. You know, people say they put that shit on everything, but I mean, that stuff just, it's delicious with pizza and delicious on wing, but I thought, oh, maybe it's just passing through my system. It's no big deal. But the next time I had to use the restroom, the story changed. It was, something happened that I'd never seen before. I saw some red spotting. I saw black tarry stools. I saw blood in the water, and I'd never seen that before. And so I was like, oh, maybe this is something. Maybe I swallowed a chicken bone. Maybe something cut me on the inside. Maybe I wasn't paying attention last night. You know, maybe I just had like a minor injury and, you know, just playing it off, Mr. Cool, like, okay, maybe it's not a big deal. I'll let it go, you know, not a problem. And it subsided. So I just kind of went along my day and waited till my wife got home. She called me when she got home. She showered and she asked how my day went. And I told her, I said, hey, just so you know, like, I'm not trying to hide anything from you, but the last time I used the restroom, there was, you know, I think there was blood in it. She goes, well, what do you mean there's blood in it? I said, oh, there's like blood in it. She goes, well, where was the blood? Is it in the water? Well, yeah, there's some blood in the water, but it was mostly around the stool. And she goes, well, what was the stool color? I was like, oh, it was black, like a black tar. And she goes, okay, well, what was it? Like, what was the texture of it? I'm like, I didn't touch it. I mean, you know, I didn't touch the turd. It was just, it was there. I could see it. And she asked me flat out, she was like, you know, what was the texture? Was it soft? Was it hard? Was it glumpy? And I'm like, glumpy? Is that a medical term? What does glumpy mean? You know? And she's like, well, I need you to do me a favor. I know this is gross. I was like, all right, what is it? She goes, I need you, next time you go, to take a picture and send it to me. And I said, all right, fine. I'm like, I'll agree to those terms, no problem. And lo and behold, about 11 o'clock at night, I felt my stomach grumbling, and I felt the need to use the restroom again. And I used the restroom, and I took a picture, and I sent her the picture, and I immediately got a call from her saying that we needed to go to the emergency room now. And I said, what? She's like, yeah, that's a lot of blood. And I realized in the picture that I had filled the entire bowl with red, black, crimson, burgundy, every shade of red to black that you could was just filling the bowl in my bathroom. And so I had to lace up my shoes, throw on my pants, and be prepared to go to the emergency room. So I had to, it's 11 o'clock at night, my kids at school the next day. So I woke up my oldest son and said, hey, just so you know, Daddy has to go to the hospital. Mommy's gonna pick me up, but if nobody's here in the morning when you see us, just so you know, we're in the hospital. That's where I'm going. We're gonna get some things checked out, but Daddy has to go to the hospital. My wife comes over, drives to my grandmother's house, picks me up, we go to the hospital that I know, which is our medical center, and I come to realize there is no emergency room. It is not an urgent care. It is just a medical group, and they are closed on a Sunday, Mother's Day. So we scramble to figure out where is the nearest emergency room. Where are we going to find an emergency room? And I remember my friend had his wife, and she had to go to the emergency room. So he said, oh, there's a hospital. I know where the hospital is. Let's put it into our phone. We put it into the phone. It's about 10 minutes away. So I put in the phone, we're listening to the directions, and my wife is driving, and that's when I noticed that she gets real tense, and she's quiet. And I know that she just had a 12-hour shift at work. She's been working with COVID patients. She's wearing her N95 mask. She's wearing her protective gear, and she's starting to freak out, right? So I've been bleeding from my insides. She's not there. She wasn't there for it, and we're headed to the emergency room. And she grabs my hand, and she's kind of shaking, and I know that in her mind she's trying to tell me that it's going to be okay, and I had to say something to her, so I did. So I looked at her and I said, honey, and she said, yeah, what is it? I'm like, can you please do me a favor? And she said, what is it? I was like, could you, since we're going to the ER, could you at least go the speed limit? Because right now you're going 10 under, and I mean, we're going to the emergency room, so we figure we might as well like get there, because nobody wants to die getting to the emergency room, right? And I'm making light of this as it is, but that's me, and my wife understood that. She knew that I was just something I noticed. And so we get to the ER, and because of COVID-19, hospitals are basically empty. Unless you have COVID, people are told not to go to the hospital. So we get to the ER, it's empty, it's midnight, there's one nurse out the door, I get dropped off, my wife is trying to come in, they're like, no, you can't come in, there's no visitors, it's just him by himself, what's going on? I said, oh, I've got this bleeding, and the nurse is asking me about rectal bleeding. I'm like, I don't think my rectum's bleeding, but they want to know, hey, that's how he puts it, puts in the notes. Says, is this your name? Yeah. Is this your birthday? Yes. He's like, oh, is everything on here right? I said, no, you're telling me that I'm a female on my bracelet. I'm not a female. Last I checked, I'm a dude. He said, oh, we'll fix that inside. So we go into the ER. I meet the staff. I give them my insurance card. They get me right in. I go straight to the back. I get an ER room. I meet the doctor. He takes some blood labs. He's like, oh, what's going on? I hear you have rectal bleeding. I'm like, I don't think my rectum's bleeding. That's just what the guy outside said, but you know, we're going to check on it. He says, okay, we're going to check on it. He's like, first, since you're 40s, you're in your 40s, we're going to have to check to see if you have hemorrhoids. And I said, all right, how do we do that? He's like, well, you're going to drop your drawers. You're going to roll up into the fetal position away from me, and I'm going to check physically for the external hemorrhoids and the internal hemorrhoids. And as I stand there, I am 6'4" and well over 300 pounds, and I am able to size up my opponents in most of my football history. And so I was glad to see that he was 5'5" and he had small hands. So as he decided to put on the glove and get the lube ready, I pulled my pants down and kept my boxer briefs on, my Captain America boxer briefs. I rolled them down like a champ, curled up into a fetal position, and felt the small caress of a man sticking his finger in my anus to tell me that I did not have any bleeding hemorrhoids. And as he was finished and I could hear the glove come off his hand, he told me that he would give me something to wipe myself up with. And that's when I was pelted with 10 pieces of gauze. And I had never felt like such a dirty whore, because clearly he had done this before and he was my first time and it wasn't special for him. So I wipe up, I pull my boxer briefs up. I'm sitting there in the hospital. He says my labs are stable. And he says, hey man, we're going to get you out of here, but we got to do another lab. It's going to be an hour and a half. You got to wait. I said, fine. And I start to hear this crazy grumbling, loud noise in my stomach. And I can just hear it going from left to right to left to right. And he's like, is there any pain? I'm like, no, it feels like, you know, if you ever had gas pain in your life, you know about that sound. And he says, is there pain? I'm like, no, there's no pain. I think I got to use the restroom. So I walk out of the hallway and I use the hospital bathroom in the ER, and I commence to absolutely defile this bathroom. I mean, you think a biohazard bin was invented for needles, but there is no such thing as a biohazard toilet. Like, I destroyed this thing. There is blood on the walls. It is red. It is crimson. It is purple. It is black. It is everywhere. And I felt awful for whoever had to clean that up. But I took a picture because for posterity, for the wife, for the doctor, showed the doctor. He said, I understand. Let's get your labs. Let's get you stable. And if you're stable, we'll get you out of here. So I was able to be discharged from the ER at 6 o'clock in the morning. My labs were stable. And I went home and slept. Wednesday, following the ER trip, I had a follow-up appointment with my primary care doctor's group and a gastrointestinal doctor. The PCP doctor said, hey, you know, it's probably just an ulcer. It's probably just something that's in your system. I wouldn't worry too about it. You're pretty young, but, you know, just to be safe, we'll get you endoscopy scheduled. And I said, all right, cool. And half an hour later, I talked to the GI doctor. He says, hey, I looked at your stuff. You know, I see what's going on. And I had him on telemed. So, like, you have it on your phone. So you're essentially having a FaceTime Zoom meeting with a doctor at home. And I'm trying to explain to him what's going on in the pictures and what had happened, because it's, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words. Luckily, my wife had happened to be there. And so she comes running over with her phone, and she's got her phone showing my phone what the pictures were for the doctor. So he could see, you know, the bloody mess that I had made. But he agrees that we should go ahead and do the endoscopy colonoscopy together. And so he schedules it for Friday. So 2 days later. The other nicety of COVID-19 is that doctors are bored. They have time. They have no appointments. They have space on their schedules. So they decide they're going to get me in right away. Like, let's go do a colonoscopy Friday morning. You free? I'm free. Let's do it. So they get me ready. I'd never had a colonoscopy before. And of course, my motto in life is go big or go home. So my first colonoscopy happens to be an endoscopy colonoscopy combo, which means I'm getting, the term is spit roasted, double teamed, or finger cuffed on video on a Friday morning. So, you know, you do the pre-prep, which is oh so pleasant. You get to drink as much fluid to make as much fluid come out of your pipework so that it's all clean and crystal clear for the doctor to read what's going on in your body. I get ready, I go in for the endoscopy colonoscopy, and I think part of like the hazing challenge with the nurses and doctors is every time a new nurse comes into your bay for the procedure, they ask you, what are you having done? As if like, I don't know what I'm having done. I'm like, oh no, I'm having this double scope. You guys are doubling me. You're doubling me. You're doing this. You're doubling me. Like, okay, I had to tell like 4 people, like, oh yeah, they're gonna shove cameras up my butt. And like, all right, cool. So I get through the colonoscopy endoscopy pretty well. They gave me the Jesus juice, which is also a lot of fun. You get the sleep on pillows. They give me the Jesus juice. I fall asleep on the pillows. I wake up, and there's the doctor with the nurse with my wife. My wife is magically in the hospital. I was surprised because there's not supposed to be any visitors. And they're talking around me, not to me. They're talking around me, and I hear, we caught it early. We caught it early. And I don't know what's going on, and I'm asking, what did we catch early? What's going on? I look at my wife, and I can see her body language, and she is completely drained. And I asked her what's going on. They said, oh, we're gonna get you a CT scan. We gotta, you know, get your pelvis, get your abdomen, you know, x-rayed, and do a CT scan, see what's going on. I said, all right, what did I miss? And they said, oh, we found a growth in your colon. It's in your large intestine. We found this growth. We think it's a malignant tumor, but we took a biopsy. I said, all right. And so I talked to my wife, we step outside, we get ready to do the CT scan. In the meantime, they scheduled me for a surgeon. Like I said, doctors are bored during COVID. We got plenty of appointments. They get me a surgeon's appointment on Monday. I talked to the surgeon. He says he read the reports and said, hey, we don't got the biopsy results, but I've looked at it. The GI doctor looked at it. We're pretty sure it's a malignant tumor. I got to cut this thing out. I said, all right. So they scheduled me for surgery a week and a half later. A day after the surgeon's meeting, we get the biopsy results. It is a malignant tumor. It is adenocarcinoma. And from what they found from the CT scan and everything else, I was diagnosed technically with stage 1 colon cancer. I'm 41 years old, and I wouldn't have had my first colonoscopy until I was 50. So that's 9 years from now, I would have had the first camera view of what was going on and growing inside me. We get to surgery the next week, the next Wednesday, more of the pre-prep, more of the liquids going in, make all the liquids come out, get to surgery, have the surgery. Surgery is success. The doctor feels great about it, got everything that he needed. They took out what they needed, took out some extra, took out some lymph nodes to test him for biopsy to see if this thing had actually spread, if it was just localized in my intestines or not. And when I woke up in the hospital, I saw that the world was burning, that there was an issue with the George Floyd and protests. And, you know, you wake up from the hospital and I teased like, oh, I was going to wake up like Walking Dead, where I went to sleep and woke up and then all of a sudden there's a zombie apocalypse. And it's pretty close with the protests. From when I woke up, but I got done with the hospital. I was in good recovery. The nurses were cheering me on because I was feeling good. I didn't need any pain meds. I was up. I could sit. I could walk. I could eat. I could do everything that they needed me to do. I just happened to have a bunch of staples in my stomach, and it looked like I made a really poor decision on a 1990 spring break where my belly button piercing got infected. So that was the aftermath of my actual surgery when I was feeling good, and I was able to get discharged from the hospital in 4 days. And they had never seen anything like that. So I was feeling great. I knew this was going to be awesome, but they told me, hey, we still got to wait for the results of the biopsy. We took 22 lymph nodes, and when we get that, we'll know where you're at and what else we have left to do. The next week, we got the results from the biopsy, and I was optimistic. I knew this was going to be great, like we were having good hope, but one of the weird things about this whole tale, and I'm just taking the time to say this, is that everyone kept saying, you know, it's probably just an ulcer. And then they would say, oh, you know, you're going to have the colonoscopy, but you're going to be fine. Then I have the colonoscopy, and it's like, oh, you're going to have surgery, and you're going to be fine. So I get the biopsy results. 1 out of the 22 lymph nodes came back positive for cancer. It had the same adenocarcinoma, and they referred me to an oncologist to get a plan for chemo treatment. So I have a personal history with chemo treatment because my father has bone marrow cancer and has had it since 1994. He has been doing chemo for over 20 years, and I have seen what it does to people on chemo. So this was not something I was looking forward to. This was not something I was expecting, and but I knew it. I was mentally prepared for this. My dad got diagnosed with cancer at 47. I knew my 40s was the decade that I was going to get diagnosed with cancer. I just didn't know when it would happen or where it would be in my body, and now I knew both. But I'm recording this on a Sunday. I actually went to the oncologist on a Friday 2 days ago, and he sat me down and told me the options about my chemo treatments. And so it looks like I'm going to be doing 3 months of a rough, aggressive, hard chemo to knock this all out of me, because it's now technically stage 2 since it's left to the lymph nodes. So, you know, it's been quite an interesting ride. For those that want to know about my wife, she was able to move back in when this all started. She tested negative for COVID 3 times. I tested negative for COVID. We do not have COVID, luckily, but I do have cancer. That has been my reality for this pandemic, and trying to figure out how I deal with my own emotions with my father's cancer now that I've been diagnosed with cancer, and how do I tell my children, you know, my 13-year-old and my 10-year-old, who I love and simply adore, that daddy has something inside him that's trying to kill him. And I have to fight and fight hard to be sick to get through those moments to get there. But, and it's going to impact their lives. Now they have to get colonoscopies at 30 and make sure that they're okay, because now there's a direct line. But, you know, these are all the things that you go through. You think about all the stuff that you've done in your life and all the things that you want to do in your life. I want to teach my kids how to drive, and I don't know if I'll get there. I don't know. There's no guarantees in life with chemo and cancer. So as I think about all that, and as people think about COVID, you know, for those who don't believe it's real, it's real. People are dying. Healthy people are dying. 25-year-olds, 35-year-olds, 40-year-olds. People are dying. And if it's not happening directly in your neighborhood, you're lucky. If you don't have to see it, you're lucky. But I've seen it every day, going in the hospitals, putting on the mask, making sure that I didn't catch it, making sure that my kids don't catch it. It is real. And now my real reality is I get to face something that's trying to kill me on my insides. And all I can leave you folks with in this audience for this tale is, when you tell people that you got stage 1 colon cancer, I'm a very open book. So I just say it point blank. It's not anything I want to hide. It's nothing I care to hide. Their first reaction is either, oh my God, or is there anything I can do for you? I can't give you my cancer. I wouldn't give you my cancer. That's not something I would ever want to do. I wouldn't want you to take this from me. It's not fair to you. But what I do tell people, and what I will tell this audience as I'm signing off, I will tell you what I tell everybody. When they say, is there anything I can do for you, Troy. And I tell them all, love your families and live your lives. That's all you can ever do for me. I will fight this thing. I will fight as hard as I can. And this was supposed to be a short cancer story. It was supposed to be a great surgery and dancing out of the hospital with a montage of me spinning around on an IV and high-fiving doctors, but that's not the reality. I get to go find out what I'm really made of in the next 3 months of taking a bunch of meds that are going to make me really, really, really sick, really weak, and probably scare the living shit out of my wife and children. But that's where we are now. That's my COVID-19 cancer 2020 story for you. Good luck, everybody. Be safe, be well, take care of yourselves, take care of each other.
I want to thank Troy for sharing that story again. Troy is by far one of my favorite people on the planet. He's hilarious, but most importantly, he's just authentic and genuine. What you see is what you get with Troy, and we are sending him all the best energy and well wishes during this tough upcoming time. You definitely have a lot of cheering fans in Tucson, Troy, and we're with you. So this is ordinarily the time that we would take intermission at an Odyssey show. I do need to acknowledge for people that are listening on the podcast that this show is somewhat visual inspired. So there's lots of videos, including a video of a cat playing just very close to me that I'm going to try to feature here. Just say hi, Holly. You seem to want to make your debut at the Odyssey stage too. A lot of the parts of this show are very visual. So if you are listening on the podcast, I would encourage you to find the actual show on our YouTube channel and watch some of the videos that are featured. So now's the time ordinarily we would send you to get beer and wine. You can push pause and get your own beer and wine now, as I have a little bit of whiskey in my cute little Arizona glass. We normally would just say we'll see you in 10 or 15 minutes, but I thought I'd use this time to show you some other ways that we, meaning the people in my household, have tried to weather the stay-at-home quarantine. So I'll just share this. Well, it speaks for itself. So enjoy a few videos of how at least Lisa and I spent our quarantine, and Tammy, our dog, who also features in this video. So that impressive video that you just saw didn't happen in one take, unfortunately. I know that you all believe that I am a skilled roller skater and with dancing skills to boot. But as we're enjoying our intermission, I thought you might also appreciate this outtake. I don't know if you can tell who of the two of us is the more seasoned roller skater, but I'll let you let you make your mind up on that yourself. It's now time for our second half. I'd like to welcome back someone who's ingrained in the Odyssey storytelling community. He's Odyssey volunteer, serves on the Story Arts Group board, and he's just a phenomenal storyteller. So I'd like to welcome back to Odyssey, Steve Braun.
Hi, I'm Steve. Let me start by saying I'm not quarantined. I feel bad for people who are, and I'm not here to gloat. I agree with the need for quarantine, and I think we may be opening things up a little too soon. Hell, there are times I wish I was quarantined. But I can't. I'm a shift supervisor at a 911 communication center. I have to go to work. I'm an essential worker, and I can't do it from home. It's just not possible. So I'm out there, and I'm exposed, and it's not very comfortable, because people aren't being really smart about this. Most people I see aren't taking it very seriously, and they look at me with judgment and scoff at me when I go out with a mask and avoid close contact. For them, it's quarantine schmarantine. And they may be right, I don't know. But it's not a chance I can take because I live with a person who has a compromised immune system. My wife Phyllis is quarantined, and we've been taking this very seriously for a very long time. But I still have to go out there pretty much every day. So this whole quarantine thing has been a duality for me. On the one hand, nothing has changed, and I go about my business in a somewhat normal way. Well, normal for me, because I'm a 911 dispatcher. And it's not really normal. To begin with, I work a night shift from 3 p.m. to 11. When I'm at work, Phyllis is home, and vice versa. With her being quarantined and working from home, we get to see a lot more of each other. We get to share a lot more meals than we usually do. And it's been really nice after 32 years of different schedules. Other than that, things are pretty normal. But there's always the other hand of the duality. On the one hand, I go shopping, I go to work. Not a lot of socializing, but that's not out of the ordinary for me. Normally, when I'm working, people are out, and when they're working, I'm at home sleeping. Anyway, I've always been somewhat of an introvert, except for this whole community storytelling thing. My point is that on the surface, not much has changed for me, but below the surface, huge change, huge stressors, and huge potential for catastrophe. Because being out there makes me a possible danger to my wife. Being out there, I'm vulnerable. I could get exposed, I could get infected, and I would bring that home to Phyllis, and that could be catastrophic. So I'm always conscious of this potential, and I do what I can, but not everything's in my control. It can be terrifying at worst, but it's always stressful. And it's not like my job isn't stressful enough anyway. It is, and this COVID thing has magnified that stress. Especially at the beginning, when we had protocols and procedures changing on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. So yeah, stress is normal for me, but this has been bordering on extreme. When the governor's order to shelter came about, we had to implement a new procedure, which started on my shift one day. Everybody coming to work had to sign a sheet saying they weren't experiencing any symptoms, and we had to take their temperature. Well, the first guy I spoke to told me he had been coughing and that he might have a fever. He said this while I was an arm's length away taking his temperature. I wasn't wearing a mask at the time. Immediately, I had to jump into action. I had to call my superiors and get instructions from them. I had to find somebody to come and relieve him so he could go home. But all the while, we were taking 911 calls, dispatching responders, and in the meantime, klaxons were going off in my head because I thought I had been exposed. Phyllis and I had done some research. We kind of knew what to do. So I let her know what was going on. She put my robe in the garage. When I got home, I threw all my clothes into the washer, and I headed off to the shower. Luckily, we live in a house where we could each have a bedroom, we could each have a bathroom. We shared the kitchen, and either ate meals at different times, or if we ate them together, we were far enough apart. More than 8 feet. We avoided being in the same room with each other for the most part. And that was really hard when really all you want to do is hold the one you love close because this is terrifying shit. Anyway, this advanced quarantine lasted for about a little more than a week. We received word that the guy tested negative and he came back to work. Phyllis had spoken with her immunologist, who told us we were doing the right thing when we suspected I had been exposed. But other than that, we could live normally. So, normal life resumed, and we were able to be ourselves, eat together, hug each other, for about a week. And then somebody else came to work with symptoms, and the whole thing started all over again. This time it only lasted for about 4 days, and luckily it hasn't happened again since. So we've been living the new normal, as they say. Well, there's one thing in my life that's not normal. That has to do with my mother. She's 85 years old, lives in an assisted care facility, and has Alzheimer's disease. With Alzheimer's, there is no normal. Under normal circumstances, you never know what to expect. My brother, sister, and I receive the weirdest phone calls sometimes. She'll call and ask if we know my grandmother and grandfather's phone number. She needs to get in touch with them because they've had an argument and she needs to set things straight. My grandfather died in 1979. My grandmother died in 1985. We haven't heard from either one of them since. Sometimes she'll call and ask if I knew where my father was and what time he was coming home for dinner. And then she'll throw in, and he better not bring that woman he's having an affair with, because I'll get really pissed. My father died in 2007. As far as I know, he'd been faithful to my mother for 50 years. There are other anomalies in her thought processes, but I won't go into them. We're all familiar with the disease. It's not really necessary. The thing is, the assisted care facility has had to take some extreme measures. They have to isolate the residents in their rooms. They're not allowed to go out. No more communal dining, no bingo, no poker, no movie nights, and no visits from family. It's been very difficult for them and very stressful, and it's advanced their disease rapidly. The phone calls come more frequently, the situations are weirder. She has a new logic, so when we try and tell her what's real or go along with whatever reality she's living in, she has arguments. And there seems to be no way out of this circular reasoning of this disease. It's very sad to watch, and it adds to my stress level. Sometimes there doesn't seem to be any escape from it, and I have to focus. I have to force myself to meditate and quiet my mind. Like everybody else, I've been catching up on movies and TV, rewatching old comfortable favorites, and generally doing things that allow my mind to turn off so I can get some rest, so I can go on with my normal life. Thanks for listening. I'm Steve. Be safe, be healthy. Good night.
So thanks, Steve, for sharing that story with us. As we try to be vigilant about sheltering in place, some of us are lucky with a pool in the backyard and some friends to socially distance with. Say hi, Logan. Hello. So it's my pleasure to introduce the next storyteller, who's going to share how she spent a lot of the quarantine when she wasn't making roller skating videos and stupid videos with me. So our next storyteller is Lisa Cardenas. I'm going to sync this shot right now. It went in. It went in. So take it away, Lisa. All right. Welcome to this episode of what Lisa did during quarantine.
There's more episodes?
Well.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's the one and only. So why don't you first tell us what your project was during the quarantine?
I made a lamp chandelier, and it was hard and big.
And when you say lamp chandelier, what are you talking about?
That's what she said. I'm drunk. Okay, well, I had all these lamps collected from estate sales and thrift stores, and I knew I wanted to hang them in my new shop that I had just signed the lease on. So I devised a way to put them all up in the middle of the room, and it kind of turned out to be as big of a project as I knew it would be, but really, actually, it took months because I had to have all the right parts and they weren't always like available to me, and just every step was so much work, but I loved it, every second of it, and now it was worth it.
All right, well, let's show some pictures to take our viewers through the process. So what's that picture?
That's before I even did anything. I was like, okay, I think this is what I want it to look like. That circular base thing is a tabletop that I found on Craigslist in northern Phoenix. I drove all the way up there in rush hour because it was the perfect one. And I regretted it pretty much every second until it was finished. And now I know that it was the perfect choice because it's awesome. But
So
yeah,
that's a rough sketch you did.
yeah, and that's all my lamps, and that was really kind of the beginning.
So after you got the table and you cut the tabletop off, what was kind of the next step?
Oh, don't you want to talk about what a pain in the ass that was?
Oh, right. Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, it was attached to a base that I found out was made out of, like, it had cement. It was like wood, cement cased in wood with rebar in the middle. And to get it detached from the actual, like, top that I wanted, I had to, like, buy a bunch of new tools and saw it all off.
And I can attest that table was like 200 pounds.
It was so heavy. It was still so heavy with just the top, but oh my god, like I wanted to burn that thing.
Right. So you basically hollowed it out as much as you could to cut down on the weight. And
yeah, because I had to hang it from the ceiling.
Right.
Like
so then
above all of my, like, the reception area. I didn't want to kill anybody.
I guess you should mention that the chandelier is sort of a feature of your second location that you're getting ready to open up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of front and center, and you know what? You're just going to have to see for yourselves.
And we'll show you, but you should definitely see it in person.
Subscribe if you want to see part 2. Just kidding.
No. So then what's this picture here?
Oh, well, I had to decide where to put all the lamps, and since this thing had a, like, basically nautical star on it, I decided to put one bright one in the middle and one from each tip of the star, which meant I had to have 16 like hanging swag lamps, which I had all of those.
You had 16 that you've been collecting over how many years?
Some of them one of them I've had for like at least 15 years. And then there's a good portion that I got because I knew I was going to do something with them. I didn't know I was going to do this, but
right,
much to his
chagrin.
Yeah, every time I picked up a lamp at a thrift store, thought his eyes were going to roll out of his head.
I didn't understand why you needed so many lamps, but now I do. So this is you drilling the holes.
Now you're going to trust me every time I hoard things, right?
So you're drilling the holes there in each point.
Oh, right, because I had to reattach that thin part of how much of a pain in the ass it was to get. Can I curse?
Sure.
To get the base off, I had to reattach this very fragile part that was essential to the lamp. There were it was a lot of problem solving as I went because I didn't know what was in there, what I had to work with.
Did you drill those holes in the side?
Oh yeah, because I wanted to have like some carnival lights around
the edges.
The edges, yes. More is more with lamps.
And then you had to install all the hardware, right?
Yeah, this is lamp hanging hardware that like little post, there is hollow threaded pipe, and I stuck that through the table, and each one is so you can like hook the chain onto the loop, and then the cord goes up, and then I can wire everything like basically on the inside of the table.
Yeah, look at that cute picture. What are you doing there? Wiring?
Well, I had to rewire a lot of the lamps that I had because they're old as shit, and the wire is just like crumbling inside them, which I also don't want to burn down the building. So I rewired all of them, which I've done a lot of. You can kind of see my lamp workshop in the back there.
Oh, right. All the parts. And then you're ready for the hanging hardware.
God, which, like, okay, again, lots of problem solving as I go. I really, really overdid it with the hanging hardware because I did not want there to be any question that this thing wasn't going to fall off the ceiling as soon as I got it up there. So, oh my God, like I even got some thread locker so that none of the bolts could come out. Like once I realized, oh, this little nut is holding probably 300 pounds of lamp off the ground, I better secure it. I did that many times.
Your lawyer approves. And so eventually it came time to hoist this thing up.
Yeah, which I had no idea how I was going to do when I drew that drawing. No idea. I was like, I guess I'll maybe figure it out when I get there. And so actually Roscoe's brothers kind of came to the rescue, and we hoisted it up with ropes. God, and I had already put chain up there, and this is like 20 feet off the ground. We're up on very high ladders and doing some kind of meticulous work to make sure that this thing will go up smoothly. It was terrifying. I'm scared of heights.
But we got it secured.
Yeah, I didn't even shit my pants.
It's always a win. And so then it came time to arrange the lamps, right?
Yeah, those are all of them. It was kind of cool to see them all in one place and for like a purpose, because they're just like scattered around the house otherwise.
So what kind of thought process went into the order that you hung them?
I had the bigger ones in the middle, the littler ones on the outside, and I knew I wanted them to have all colorful light bulbs in them. So, I mean, at that point, not a whole lot, just like varying the sizes. But once I started putting light bulbs in there, I wanted kind of a stickler for color theory. So you'll see.
And so we put the 8 biggest ones in the middle, 8 points with shorter chain.
Yeah, do we have a picture of the points on the table?
Eventually, but it's the finished project. So then the smaller lamps went on the outer 8 points with hanging a little bit lower.
People can see us right now?
This is part just of the that tiny little box. Mostly it's the photos.
Oh.
So
here we go.
Here's one of the reveals. That I believe is when we're working on hanging them. Yes. Let me see if I can switch my share screen to the time-lapse video. This is a time-lapse video of us hanging, I think, the middle ones.
It works.
So you can see the design on the table, the pointed kind of nautical star with 16 points.
It's so many lamps. Like, just imagine every time I found one of those at a thrift store or an estate sale, I got really excited. And I love them dearly.
Yeah, you love lamp.
I love lamp. Just that one big one.
So this, I think, is close to the finished. There's still, I think, a couple more. Oh no, that's the hanging hardware. But was that at first lighting?
Yes.
It's pretty glorious
I know. It's,
in all of its majesty.
Did I
Here's
not-
the entryway to your new shop.
yeah.
So you have the chandelier as the main focus, but also your deer here and such.
Yeah, so go back.
Oh, let's show them this one too.
Oh.
That's the from below view.
Yeah, yeah. So I picked out all the colors to match the lamps. Did I not give you a video, more videos?
I don't think that we're going to be able, it doesn't work to share more than one video, unfortunately.
God.
We're learning as we go. So yeah, that is a pretty magnificent piece of art on its own.
Okay, now let me interview you.
No, I'm interviewing you.
Okay.
So if you want to see that in person, Lisa will be opening a second Haunted Hands location.
Well, it's open. I mean, we're working in it. We just can't throw any parties.
That's true.
So I'm kind of inviting like groups of people over to come see it at a time. But
Right. And it's downtown,
scary.
6th Street and 7th Avenue, roughly.
Yep.
So cool. You could stop in there and get t-shirts and merch and, of course, tattoos.
When you wear a mask
Exactly.
and knock loudly, because we're not really doing anything in there except tattooing our clients and locking the door.
As you should. All right. You feel good about that?
I don't know. You're the interviewer.
Yeah, I feel good about it.
Okay.
Good job. Thanks, Lisa, for that story. Up here on my roof, with the Catalinas burning in the background, one of the interesting things that happened during the quarantine for us was that we started to hear one of our neighbors playing the saxophone, somewhat poorly. Lots of scales and what could be described, I guess, as freeform jazz. But it was kind of cool. Every night, probably around 7 or 8, you would hear someone playing their saxophone. And I was walking my dog one night around dusk, and I heard the sounds, and I noticed I was coming up on it pretty close. And I saw a guy on his roof kind of playing his saxophone, just dancing around. I saw the guy. I found him. And I tried to get a good video of it, but then he turned around and he saw me. So the video isn't great. But somewhere about 2 blocks just that way of me is someone who I think was just exercising their free expression while they were locked in. And I'm kind of sad that he hasn't been playing lately. I actually suspected that he started playing because we had a little gathering in our backyard where we had one of our friends playing the flute. I got my old tenor saxophone out, and we were playing Africa by Toto and some other stuff. So I'm kind of sad that I never got up here on the roof and joined that saxophone player in his efforts to make the quarantine a little more bearable. So maybe I'll get the courage later or sometime to come back up here with my saxophone and call out to him. But until then, we have one other story, our final storyteller of the night, Ethel Lee-Miller, with a story about what she's done during the quarantine. So here's Ethel.
My husband and I have been sheltering at home since March 16th. So we are in our 8th week of togetherness. And I have to tell you, I have the best husband in the whole world. No, really. And it's not like I am, whatever you want, honey type of mate. But my husband is he is extraordinarily agreeable. Example, I'm working in my office and I can't get anything to back up. Hank, can you come and help me back up my computer or look at it later? Hold on, he says. I'll be right there. Agreeable. Or agreeableness not even solicited. He'll bring me coffee. Here, I brought you a cup of coffee. And he has exactly the way I like it. It's not as if he is just standing around waiting for me to give him some kind of a honey-do list. The man is very active. He bikes, he hikes, he's a voracious reader. He has probably one of the richest interior lives of anyone I know, and he can express himself in thoughtful ways about people and history. So it's wonderful being around him. And I admit that part of me puts all this agreeableness in the emotional container that is labeled all needs fulfilled for Ethel. Now, I know this is self-centered. I'm not guaranteeing any kind of maturity, but this kind of agreeableness and kindness, my husband loves me. I am cherished by my husband. I am walking around in this bubble of bliss in the house. And I can really go with this because not only does he love me, but he loves me best. And then I remember the last time this happened to me, this bliss bubble that I was in. It was probably about 20 years ago. It was extraordinary. He wasn't being the same. He wasn't jumping into gleeful gossip with me anymore. He didn't come home with a list of grievances about his coworkers, or he wasn't berating the TV commentators like he usually did. He was just being so kind. That was about the time he started bringing coffee up to my office, unsolicited. And it wasn't like he brought the coffee and said, well, while I'm here, would you make these copies or would you type this up for you? Just brought me the coffee. One more example of extreme kindness. It was a time when I was going to visit my mother. We were in New Jersey. She was in a nursing home. She was declining. And it was sometimes difficult to visit her. It either could be like a pearl in the necklace of understanding that she and I were stringing together, or it could be gut-wrenching because she was very unhappy. So one day I'm getting ready to go visit her and I'm getting the car keys and I had some flowers to bring her and I'm looking in my pockets for little bits of compassion. And Hank says, hold up, I'll go with you today. Oh, that would be so great. He said, yeah, well, both my parents are gone and your mother is still with you. You're lucky to have her with you. And, it might be a tough visit. So this would be easy for you if someone else is with you. Yeah, definitely kind. So here we are 20 years later. And I'm thinking back to that time. And I'm thinking how that was a wonderful visit with my mother. And the next day we're having breakfast. And in New Jersey, we had this little breakfast nook. And the sun would come in the morning and I'm still in my bliss bubble. And Hank is making breakfast. He puts my plate in front of me and then he sits down with his plate. And I said, Hank, I have to tell you, thank you. Not just for breakfast, but you've been so kind to me. And I just really appreciate it. So he's digging into his breakfast and he's cutting his egg. He always had eggs sunny side up and he would cut it and the yolk would seep all over the plate and go over to his toast and get all soggy, but that's the way he likes it. And so then he looks at me and he reaches to the middle of the table and he picks up this piece of wood, little bitty piece of wood. And he said, do you remember this? And I said, oh yeah, I got that years ago at a retreat. I don't know if you can see, it says kindness on it. I said, yeah, well, I decided to start doing that. Oh, Hank, that's what I felt. And he said, yeah, I felt it too. I've even been doing it at work. He said, I tried it with my boss and she and I are getting along. And I did it with my coworkers and we're not so behind on the schedule. He said, I even did it on the way home on the train. Oh, I said, it wasn't just me. I sounded petulant. But I had to laugh because I had said, oh, I thought you were just spoiling me with kindness. And I realized he had enough to go around. So I think of that today, 20 years later. And he's doing it again. He's being really kind. And we are also in the midst of a pandemic. And we are in the midst of international and national social and political and racial inequities, huge inequities. And it's confusing and it's scary. And I know people's nerves are frayed, to say the least. Many of my daily comforts have been ripped away. And I know there are people that didn't have those comforts to begin with. So it must be really scary. What can I do? I can reach for this. I can reach for this like it's a talisman, my little piece of wood, and I can be kind. Now, it's easy enough to be kind most of the time with my family and my friends because we have shared values, we have history, so we're used to working things out. It's not so easy with people that I don't really know that well, that I maybe don't understand. Maybe they don't understand me. You know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to reach for my little kindness. I can make a commitment to be kind to everyone. Now, granted, it won't always work, but what I do is I start with myself. And it's not as self-centered as you might think, because if I feel that I've been kind to myself, I know how good that feels. The knots go away from my stomach and I breathe a little easier. So I can try to be willing to share that with other people. I can be like Ben's bells in action. Coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, yesterday Hank sent me an article on an email that he had read online. And it was about this doctor in British Columbia. Her name is Dr. Bonnie Henry. And she is a foremost doctor in British Columbia. And on March 17th, she held a press conference. And she had some medical recommendations, and she had some very strong medical recommendations for shutting down, lockdown, quarantining, social distancing. And because she was quite knowledgeable and credible, had been over the years in her field, people listened to her and they took those recommendations. And British Columbia was not clobbered like it could have been. It was a great press conference. And I thought, oh, this is really nice. And yet the most important thing, and she said this, the most important thing in her press conference, she said at the end, she said, this is our time to be kind. To be kind, to be calm, and to be safe. Be kind.
Well, that's the stories from the quarantine show. In honor of Troy and the message of his story to get out and live your life, I thought I'd come out here and try to inspire my neighbor to the south to keep playing that saxophone on his roof by playing saxophone on my roof. So I'm just going to send this out. This is my message from the quarantine. Oh, that's about all the saxophone I can play. So that's a wrap. Hope you join us at our next show, and hopefully we'll see you in person real soon.
How about you do a little dance with your saxophone, like
Just
that
do
guy
one of
did?
these.
Yeah. You gotta play it.
Turn left. There you go, perfect.